Darkness has crept back into the world, and once again the de Rune children stand on the precipice of calamity. Pushed to the brink, often alone in their struggles, Amicia and Hugo must confront a terrible reality. Hey there friends, it's Codiak here, welcome to Legacy Gaming. Today, we're diving into Asobo Studio's latest game, A Plague Tale: Requiem, to find out if it's worth your time. Before we dive in, I want to give a huge shout out to Focus Entertainment, who provided us with a copy of A Plague Tale: Requiem a few weeks ahead of launch. Plenty of time for us to take in everything the game has to offer and really immerse ourselves in the story. And what a story it is. For those that need a quick refresher, you play as Amicia de Rune, a young girl and protector over Hugo de Rune, her brother, and a carrier of the Prima Macula, a mysterious illness and curse that is awakened in Hugo and drives the entire plot of both the first and subsequently second game in the series. It both pains and excites me to say that to fully appreciate A Plague Tale: Requiem, you first need to play A Plague Tale: Innocence. There aren't many games nowadays that require a true prerequisite, but as I alluded to before, story is everything with this game. Of course, I'm not going to spoil anything in this review. That would just be a travesty to you as a player, but I'll do my best to highlight the experience and share some pointed thoughts about the continued journey of the de Runes. Things pick up 6 months after the end of A Plague Tale: Innocence, and by all accounts, life is good. The setup to the entire game actually was reminiscent of BioShock Infinite. Things are beautiful and tranquil, but it doesn't last, and before you've had a chance to really settle into the experience, the carpet is pulled out from beneath you. What was most captivating about the first few chapters of Requiem was the relationship between Hugo and Amicia, which has blossomed. Amicia truly understands and embraces her role as Hugo's protector, and Hugo, in turn, realizes that Amicia, not Beatrice, his mother, is the one person in his life that wants the best for him, no questions asked. It's a subtle dynamic shift from the first game to the second, but you can see it play out in almost every cutscene and small interaction between the two characters. Simply put, it's beautiful, made even better by the performance of both actors who lend their voices to the characters. As you step off on your adventure, you realize almost instantly that you're far away from the events of the previous game. The developers do a masterful job drawing contrast in the world, creating spaces that feel distinctly different while also remaining familiar. It's a skill I feel deserves a bit of shine because not every developer understands how to create differences within a world, while still laying true to the theme of that world. The Requiem team has none of those issues, and simple changes to the color palette, architecture, and flora provide 3 key levers the developers can pull to change the world in interesting and meaningful ways to make every leg of the journey feel more memorable. Unlike the first game, Requiem explores new, slightly more fantastical locations. Coastal towns, canyons, and carnivals are just some of the locations you'll visit, and they provide such a splash of color in a world teetering on the brink of collapse. Even within each level, the developers find ways to capture both beauty and chaos. It's a balancing act, one that plays out in real time as you creep, crawl, and kill across southern France. Much of the game's story plays out in cutscenes, acting as small moments of respite that provide both a mental and physical break from the action. Throughout your journey, you'll run into new characters, and fleeting as some of them often are, they add a new dynamic to your adventure. Oftentimes, these characters are the connective tissue that lead you from one pivotal moment to another, but it's the solid writing and fantastic voice acting that truly bring them to life. There are some moments when the quality of the voice acting falls a bit flat, but when it matters the most, the lines land, and that only adds to the overall immersion. Each character is also distinctly different from the next, and while some may find this a bit on the nose, it allows our main characters, Amicia and Hugo, to interact with very different types of people, building new relationships during missions and culminating during key moments in the adventure. One thing I think the team nailed this time around was making most of these characters memorable, something they didn't quite get right in the first game. However, in Requiem, it's easy to remember names and faces of characters that impact the story. Some might feel the team goes a bit too far to make characters feel distinct, but I would argue being memorable is far more impactful than if we were sitting through cutscenes filled with bland and unoriginal characters. I also love the flawed nature of nearly every person Amicia and Hugo meet on their adventure. As a player, you're just looking for that white knight that will take these two lost and downtrodden kids and lead them to sanctuary. Now, I won't spoil if they ever find that someone in the game, but what I will say is that flawed characters feel more real, more relatable, and ultimately complement a world barely hanging on by a thread. It makes sense to pivot now and talk about the gameplay, something that is still just as important to the experience as the story. I wouldn't say the developers have drastically changed the formula, but they have managed to tap into something new, using Amicia and Hugo as vessels to test out interesting ideas and new systems. The events of Innocence have left a deep impression on both kids, and that's evident in the gameplay. For example, Amicia no longer hesitates to kill to protect those she loves. In fact, during certain moments of the game, she almost loses herself in the act, and it's a shocking contrast from the Amicia we're first introduced to in Innocence. In the same vein, Hugo is also different, and while his innocence is still largely intact, he has a better sense of the reality of the situation, a slightly more grounded understanding of the world and the perils in it. The more experienced Daruns are a result of the events of their past, and that maturity also informs some of the game's newest ideas or biggest changes, such as Amicia's ability to take down and kill guards twice her size. The first time the game forces you to do it, you're taken aback at this different side to Amicia, and it's still new to the player. As you might expect, there's also a slightly new array of tools at her disposal, ideas meant to enhance the sprawling environmental puzzles the game is known for. Finally, the direct enhancement of her abilities come in the form of a crossbow, a weapon she wields out of necessity, not desire. It's amazing to experience the evolution of her kit, and while there are definitely enhancements to the weapons and abilities she can summon at any given time, it's the way the game seamlessly drip feeds you those new ideas in moments of crisis that really help you feel like Amicia is growing as a character. Hugo's gameplay is also changed. The Prima Macula that consumes his body also gives him power, and in an almost Assassin's Creed-like way, he learns to use the rats to his advantage, scouting areas with his echo ability and sometimes controlling hordes of rats entirely. If you're worried about this being a bit too much, a bit too overpowered, don't, because there are still limitations on these abilities and are often only accessible when the game decrees it necessary. These newfound powers and abilities are essential for the Darun's survival because one area of the game that has massively changed is the team's approach to world design. The game is challenging, there is absolutely no doubt about that, and a large reason for that challenge is the team's new approach to the world. Arenas, or areas where you'll face various enemies, are much more open concept, offering multiple ways to traverse them, and that adds a layer of complexity to the game that wasn't really there in Innocence. The team really pushes the boundaries of each area just enough to really force you to make decisions. There's often not one path to freedom or sanctuary, there are multiple, and that in and of itself will cause you as a player to make more decisions in the heat of the moment. Sometimes that often will lead to exposure, confrontation, and even death. For players coming over from Innocence, I think you'll immediately recognize this difference and that added challenge it brings to the table. While difficult, it also adds a much greater sense of satisfaction when you successfully navigate an area. Sometimes it'll be downright messy, and reaching the end of an arena will feel like you just escaped the shadow of death. Other times you'll just sail through, a sense of confidence helping guide you forward. It's a very satisfying experience made possible by the enhancements to the world. The team also smartly uses perspective to enhance the gameplay experience. On occasion, the camera will completely flip, and you'll have to navigate the world a completely different way. This often happens during an escape sequence when you need to outrun a swarm of rats, but it's a simple way to create a different environment in the game, and while it may not be the most ideal way to move around the world, you can't argue it changes up the gameplay. At its core, A Plague Tale: Requiem is an interactive story and one of the most immersive experiences of this generation. It's clear that the team had a roadmap in their head of how they wanted the Darun's adventure to play out, and you can plot each of those key moments as the story ebbs and flows. What's so powerful about the game is its simplicity and its unyielding focus on the narrative that's driving the entire experience forward. In the case of Requiem, it's the never-ending pursuit of that carrot on a stick, dangling just out of reach, but that's the magic sauce that keeps you on the edge of your seat as you push through from one chapter to the next. What's almost too good is how many climactic moments there are within the game. You build and build and build, reach the apex, experience Requiem in all its glory, and think you're finally reaching some sort of tipping point, only to find that there's one more leg of the journey. It's almost a bit exhausting, and thank God we had the time to actually play the game over a few weeks, because trying to power through this cover to cover is a daunting task. The tricky thing is, the pacing is just spot on. An environmental puzzle will lead into some sort of confrontation, then slow down for a moment of storytelling, only to pick back up for some sort of chaotic acceleration of the journey. It's as if the developers are constantly fiddling with the tempo of an orchestral symphony, and you're just trying to cling on for dear life. What I think represents the biggest accomplishment in the game's story is the idea that nothing is certain. Amicia, Hugo, and whatever companion is part of the story at any particular time usually have a plan, but that plan almost never goes off without a hitch, and it's your job as the player to adapt and adjust to whatever curveball comes your way. This is all supported in the gameplay itself, reflected in the characters and how they approach any given situation. While running or sneaking through an area, the characters will open up about their fears and reservations about the current situation, and that humanizes them in a way most games just don't get right. We're not talking about a few canned lines of dialogue. We're talking intimate conversations about the human spirit that help ground the gravity of an almost hopeless situation. If this all sounds a bit cerebral, that's because it is. And again, at its core, A Plague Tale Requiem is first and foremost a story-driven game, one that completely bucks the norms of the current gaming landscape in favor of a much different kind of experience, one that forgoes the tropes and trappings of most modern games in favor of a completely unique and unforgettable journey. At this point, I don't want to parse language because it's important that you hear this loud and clear. A Plague Tale Requiem might not be a game for everyone. It won't pull the same numbers as a Fortnite, and it probably won't break sales records as one of the top sellers of 2022. But that's a damn shame, because Requiem isn't just the special game. It's a masterclass in telling a compelling story, an example of gameplay systems supporting that story, and easily one of the most interesting and brilliant games of 2022. I implore you to check out A Plague Tale Requiem, a game not just worthy of your time, but an astonishing video game triumph worth celebrating. So there you have it, our gushing and 100% honest review of A Plague Tale Requiem. The game releases on October 18th for the PC, PS5, and Xbox Series X, and will run you about $50 to $60 depending on your platform. If you found this worth your time review helpful or enjoyable, do me a solid and hit that thumbs up and consider subscribing. There are still a few big games coming out in 2022, and if you're looking for a new take on some of the year's biggest titles, we've got you covered. I also want to let you know that our 2022 Leave a Legacy charity event is right around the corner. Join us live on stream October 22nd as we raise money for Connecticut Children's. We're giving away over $8,000 worth of games right on the stream, so be sure to join us in Discord and help us reach our $10,000 charity goal. My name is Codiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.